Welcome everybody to the second lecture in Ops, the Onion Pokemon School, nothing to do with the shooter. You've had a lot of time to do your homework from the last lecture, so I hope you're well primed and performed and prepared for this new lecture. The second one is going to be on team building. First of all, where does one exactly go to build these teams? I've had many a question about this over the years. And it varies from time and place, 5 years ago it'd be a lot different to what it is now. What I do, and this is as a disclaimer, this is how I go about doing Pokemon team building and all of that type of related activity. It is not the only way to go about it, and you may have other methods of which you think are better. That is fine, we're here to debate. It's an academic to a degree lecture, so if things work for you and you do them in a different way, good, all the better. Now I use Pokemon Online to build my teams. It's not necessarily where I play my Pokemon, but it is where I set my teams up and make them. In the slide here is a graphic of what Pokemon Online in this current update looks like. There are reasons to use this method as team building software, and I'll show you some of them right now. The first reason is because the information that you need, so all the details on stats, on moves, on IVs, all of that sort of thing, they are highly condensed without being similar to an accountant's spreadsheet. It's not hideously ugly to look at, but at the same time the information is condensed in such a way that it is easy to access. The second reason is the ability to organise move pools. Now I find this very useful when I'm team building, to be able to see all the moves available for me to choose from and have them in the categories of physical moves, special moves, and then the other moves, so status inflicting moves and similar things like that, non-damage moves. I find this a great help when building teams and move pools and move sets into it. The third reason is the ability to export teams in a notepad file. Once you've designed your team on this software, you can export it and have it in a very condensed file available on Notepad, which you can use to put on Rate My Team threads and such things in a much more civilized way. Copy and pasting screen grabs is not as effective and is much less seen on the internet as a result. It's not the correct etiquette to do. So let's now start talking about the mechanics within a team itself. We've talked about where we can design our teams. Now I want to talk about the teams themselves. And I've started with what has to be considered a completely idiot-proof method. It's a device, a framing device as I put on the slide, that will work in any tier, and on the left it is for the more basic and more simple and the people that are just getting into the game, whereas on the right there are more complicated and complex factors. In each team you should have one from each of the 6 boxes, especially if you're, like I said, a newcomer to the game. You want to have all 6 of these bases covered. And the first section is all about entry hazards or spinning. The second is about either having an offensive spinner or utility Pokemon. Then you'll have a special attacker, physical attacker, special wall and physical wall. All seems pretty self-explanatory. I will show you example Pokemon in each of these sections momentarily. For people that want it in a more complex fashion, I have put the details on the right to say, at the start for example, that spinning and entry hazard uses can be done by walls. They can also be done by the same Pokemon. Some Pokemon will spin and set up entry hazards. Fortress, for example, is a key one that can do both. When it comes to attacking options, there are many Pokemon that can do both physical and special attacking at the same time. And as for walls, there are very much the possibility for mixed walls and for walls to be able to deal damage, and that will put them more into a tank category. So if we look at some entry hazard using examples, as you can see from the 3 Pokemon here, it's not something that only bulky Pokemon do. Boldore, for example, is a Pokemon that can use entry hazards and is very bulky. Quillfish is very physically bulky, but is very much the opposite when it comes to its special bulk. It can lay up spikes and toxic spikes. Frostlass in the middle is neither physically or specially bulky, and what it is is actually a spin blocker that can set up entry hazards as well. Normally spikes being the entry hazard it can set up. Now we move on to utility Pokemon. These are Pokemon that can use moves like Aromatherapy, Heal Bell, Wish, Baton Pass, all these types of things that in isolation aren't hugely useful, but their benefit is to Pokemon way and beyond the current one out in play. Three examples of Pokemon that can definitely do these include Lantern, Miltank and Umbreon. Lantern being a Heal Bell user, Miltank being a Heal Bell user as well as being able to recover its own HP using Milk Drink, and Umbreon being able to use Baton Pass, Wish and Curse to go along with Baton Pass. These are very good examples of Pokemon that can act as utility pivots. When it comes to special attacking examples, it's all about speed and the special attack stat and very little else matters. Espeon, Raikou and Gengar are the examples I picked here, all Pokemon with base speeds and special attacks over 100, and all focusing on how much damage they can do most of the time. When it comes to physical attacking examples, it's the same, but I wanted to put an example in here, and I'm choosing Machamp, that not all attacking Pokemon are massively quick. There are Pokemon that are attackers that are not very quick. Machamp has a base speed of 55, and you would say that's pretty slow even compared to the average. So it's not always about he who attacks first wins, although the metagame has been changing more and more to the offensive and speedy nature. Cranidos, Weavile and Machamp are the Pokemon that you see there respectively from left to right. As I mentioned in the more complex example, there are mixed attackers, and three here that I have picked are very much Pokemon that can attack on the physical and the special spectrum, either specialising in that or doing both at the same time. For example, Salamence very frequently does its Dragon Dance set but carries Fire Blast as well. Honchkrow is a Pokemon that has an incredibly powerful move pool on the physical side, having access to Brave Bird and Sucker Punch, but it does also have special moves it can use as well, Heat Wave being the key example. It's not incredibly quick, but both its attacking stats are very high. Compare this with Infernape, who has both attacking stats and speed being very high. This is why it can do many different sets at the same time, and it is a very widely used Pokemon competitively. When it comes to special walls, as I've put in the note beneath the title, not all walls do walling and nothing else. Chansey is an example of a Pokemon that can do special walling as well as use Aromatherapy, so it can be used in a utility fashion as well. Regice and Milotic both have a base 100 special attack, so not only can they sponge special hits incredibly effectively, they can also deal them out. Milotic actually has a special bonus as well in that its ability boosts its physical defense, meaning it can mix wall quite effectively too in certain situations. Physical walling examples that I have picked include Tangrowth, which can definitely hit very hard actually off both attacking stats as well. Gliscor, which is an incredibly common Pokemon in the OU tier, and not just because it walls physically, because it can do many other attacking potentially moves too. It's especially good to be able to deal with quite a few of the dragon types. And there's Weezing there as an example from the bottom tier, never used, which can not only do physical walling, it can also do attacking off both sides of the spectrum and can also explode when it needs to, and it's done all of its job. Albeit that's not as common as it used to be due to the nerf to explosion. There are mixed wall examples as well. The three examples I have picked actually have identical defences and special defences. It doesn't have to be the case, as you've seen from Milotic, for a mixed wall to exist. However, Registeel has an incredible base 150 defense and special defense, and you would consider that as it has Curse, it can very much become a tank. Licky Licky has one of the most powerful explosions in the game. It also gets access to Curse, it gets access to Swords Dance, it gets access to Wish. It has many options available to it. And Spiritomb, if you've seen my Pokemon of the Week series recently, I've shown you a whole range of sets that Spiritomb can do, whether it be purely on the special side, purely on the physical side. It gets access to Will-O-Wisp to help it on its physical side, or it itself can go rather offensive and be a proper tank. I'm going to try and generalise what I've said now and put it into a 3-point advice. Never have more than 3 weaknesses to the same type. You should never really have more than 2, but some types you will often get 3 weaknesses to. If you're going to have a type that you have 3 Pokemon weak to, you want it to be something like ground, electric or fighting, because each of these 3 types have a type that it is completely ineffective against. So for example, if you have 3 Pokemon weak to ground, you can put a Gliscor in there which is completely immune, and a Salamence which will be also completely immune. Pick a Pokemon you like in the tier that you wish to play and then build around that. That is very often what people do. You pick a Pokemon you like, put it in the 6-box matrix that I put up earlier, and you can go around there. If you're not having fun, you shouldn't be playing the game. Always bear that in mind. And as I alluded to a bit earlier, the metagames are getting more and more offensive. Some tiers are getting more offensive more quickly than others. Some are naturally more offensive than others. I brought that up in the last lecture. But you do need to keep yourself up to date on what is commonly used in each tier and what the general team themes are, because certain themes like Sandstorm tend to be far less aggressive than, for example, Sunny Day and Rain teams. Both of these being very much set up the weather, then hit them as hard as possible with the boost from the weather. So to summarise, new players should focus on keeping to the basics that I put on the idiot proof matrix. Stick to the 6 boxes that I have mentioned. Only those immersed in battling and simulators and DS Wi-Fi should ever deviate away from the basic formula, because if you are new, you really don't want to try and bite off more than you can chew. Keep Pokemon and their roles specific. If you have a team with too many special walls, you're not going to be doing enough attacking and you're going to get completely destroyed by the move Taunt. If you have too many physical attackers, Intimidate's going to ruin you, and so is Will-O-Wisp. You need to have a nice balance in order to make a team effective. And the final point is that although Notepad is a hideous place to build teams because there's no visual feedback, it is a perfect place to store details of teams once you've completed them. I would save each team in a separate Notepad document, but that is my advice only. And the next lesson will be the pros and cons of DS Wi-Fi against the online simulators. I hope you've enjoyed the lecture and you've learnt something today. Class dismissed.